The air in the boardroom on the 42nd floor always smelled the same. A sterile blend of lemon polish, cooled, recirculated air, and the metallic tang of fear. I had spent 15 years learning to breathe that air, learning to navigate the currents of power that flowed through the hallways of Sterling Heart like electricity. I was the senior liaison for strategic partnerships. It was a title that sounded boring to the uninitiated. To anyone who actually knew how money moved in the city, it meant I held the keys to the kingdom. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. My power was in the silence between signatures, in the nod across a mahogany table, in the $3 billion merger. I had spent the last 9 months sculpting from a block of chaotic raw data into a masterpiece of corporate synergy. I was standing by the floor-ceiling window reviewing the final clauses on my tablet and the door slammed open. It wasn't just an entrance, it was an invasion. Cassidy, the newly appointed VP's daughter, clacked into the room. She was 24 years old, armed with a freshly printed MBA that her father had likely paid a building wing for, and wearing a smirk that suggested she thought she was the main character in a movie. Everyone else was just lucky to be extras in. It was her first day. Literally, her first hour. "Excuse me." Voice cut through the hum of the office like a serrated knife. She wasn't looking at the view. She was looking at me. Or rather, she was looking at my torso. I lowered the tablet slowly, turning to face her with the practice neutrality I used for erratic investors. "Can I help you, Cassidy?" "I'm Emily. We were supposed to meet at I Know Who You Are," she interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. She was holding a thick spiralbound book. The employee handbook relic from the 9S that nobody had actually opened since the invention of the iPhone. "And I know what you're doing. Reviewing the merger protocols for the Sterling deal," I offered, keeping my voice level. "No," she sneered, stepping closer. She smelled of overpowering jasmine perfume and insecurity. "You are violating Code 4 Section B regarding appropriate client F-facing attire." I blinked. I was wearing a vintage Armani blazer, charcoal gray with pearl buttons paired with tailored slacks and a leather tote that cost more than her car. It was the armor of a woman who closed deals. "I'm sorry, the pearl buttons," she said, tapping the handbook with a manicured nail. "The handbook clearly states standardized closures only. And that bag, it looks distressed." "We don't do distressed here. We represent excellence." The room had gone dead silent. The analysts in the glass cubicles outside had stopped typing. Junior associates were freezing mid-sip of their lattes. This is the part where I usually tell people that if you enjoy watching train wrecks in slow motion or stories about people getting exactly what they deserve, you should probably take a second to hit that follow button and upvote because trust me, the crash is coming. But right then, nobody was moving. "Cassidy," I said, my voice dropping an octave, deadly calm. "A meeting with Marcus Sterling in 48 hours to finalize a $3 billion acquisition. This blazer is not the issue. The issue is that you are interrupting my preparation." She turned a shade of red that clashed with her scarf. She wasn't used to push back. She was used to daddy's credit card and terrified interns. "I am the vice president's chief of staff," she announced, throwing a title around that I knew didn't technically exist for her pay grade. "I am enforcing standards. If you can't follow the basic rules of this company, how can we trust you with its future?" It was so absurd, I almost laughed, but I saw the gleam in her eye. She didn't care about the buttons. She wanted a scalp. She wanted to prove on day one that she was the alpha predator. She had picked me because I looked established, and taking down the matriarch is the quickest way to scare the pack. "Go home, change. Write a formal apology to our for the infraction," she commanded, crossing her arms. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the tremor in her hands, the desperate need for validation. I also saw the complete lack of understanding of what I actually did. "No," I said simply. "Excuse me, no, I have work to do." I turned back to the window. "You're fired," she shrieked. The words hung in the air, heavy and ridiculous. I turned back around. She was panting slightly, eyes wide. She had committed. She had pulled the trigger. "You can't be serious," I said, not pleading, but analyzing. "I am your superior by proxy and you are insubordinate." She yelled, her voice cracking. "Pack your things. Security will escort you out." Now I looked at the terrified faces of the analysts outside the glass. I looked at the $3 billion contract on my tablet. And then a strange cold clarity washed over me. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt relieved. Okay, I said. Cassidy blinked, expecting a fight, expecting begging. Okay, you're right, Cassidy, I said, snapping the cover of my tablet shut. Standards are important. I'll pack my things immediately. I didn't wait for her response. I walked past her, my shoulder brushing hers, and headed for my office. She thought she had just exerted dominance. She had no idea she had just pulled the pin on a grenade that wouldn't explode for 48 hours. It just fired the only person in the hemisphere who could interpret the handshake codes of the Sterling family. As I walked down the hall, I didn't look back, but I could feel her staring, confused by my compliance, wondering why the kill felt so empty. My office was a sanctuary of controlled chaos. Unlike the sterile minimalism of the boardroom, my desk was a landscape of stacked DOSes, legal pads filled with shorthand that only I could decipher. A rack that was, ironically, the most valuable object in the entire building. Cassidy probably thought everything was digitized. She didn't understand that in the world of high-stakes mergers, the real deals were made on personal cell numbers written on the back of cocktail napkins and business cards kept in leather binders. I didn't rush. Rushing implies guilt or at least panic. I had neither. I opened my drawers with the slow precision of a bomb disposal technician. First, the personal items. The framed photo of my father, who had taught me that integrity is expensive but desperation costs more. The crystal paperweight Marcus Sterling had given me after we closed the Tokyo deal 5 years ago. And then the Rolodex. I dropped it into my distressed leather tote. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. I could see my assistant Sarah hovering in the doorway. And sat by the window. I took my phone out of my bag and turned it off, let them sit in the silence for a while. I spent the afternoon at an art gallery. I stared at abstract expressionist paintings, chaos contained within frames, and felt a profound sense of kinship. It was amazing how much detail you missed in the world when you were busy carrying the weight of $1 billion corporation on your shoulders. For the first time in a decade, I noticed the texture of the paint, the brush strokes, the silence. It wasn't until 6 p.m., when I was back in my apartment pouring a glass of Nibbio, that I decided to turn my phone back on. The device buzzed in my hand like an angry hornet. It didn't stop vibrating for a full 2 minutes. Screen lit up with a cascade of notifications, a digital avalanche of regret, 14 missed calls from office. Sarah, 3 missed calls from HR director. 5 missed calls from unknown number, 27 new emails. I took a sip of wine, savoring the tannins, and scrolled through the text messages. Sarah, 11:30 a.m. Emily, legal just came down. They're asking who authorized your termination. Cassidy is locked in her office. Sarah, 12:45 p.m. The partners from the Tokyo firm tried to call you. Cassidy took the call. It didn't go well. She told them you were no longer a cultural fit. There was a lot of yelling in Japanese. Sarah, 2:30 p.m. Where are the appendix files? Cassidy is screaming at it. She says you deleted them. It says they never existed on the server. Emily, everyone is freaking out. I smiled, swirling the wine in the glass. Of course, they weren't on the server. The appendix files weren't documents. They were the nuances. They were the handshake agreements regarding the retention of key staff in the acquired company. They were the verbal promises I had made to Marcus Sterling about the preservation of his family's legacy branding. They were in the notes I took by hand, the notes that were currently sitting in the fireplace of my apartment turning into ash. I opened an email from the general counsel. If it Thorne, David was a good man, but he was spineless when it came to the board. Subject: urgent employment status misunderstanding Emily. There seems to have been a significant breakdown in communication regarding protocol enforcement. Please call me immediately. We need to discuss a reinstatement of your contract before the Sterling meeting. We can smooth this over. Cassidy is new and perhaps overzealous. Let's not let emotions derail the merger. Emotions. I whispered to the empty room. They always called it emotions when a woman reacted, but strategy when a man did. I didn't reply. I could picture the scene at the office perfectly. The sun would be setting, casting long, accusing shadows across the open floor plan. Cassidy would be exhausted, her jasmine perfume turning stale, her white power suit wrinkled. She would be realizing that vice president's daughter was a title that commanded obedience but not respect. Certainly not knowledge. She had the files. She had the numbers. She could see the valuation is $3 billion. But she didn't know why. She didn't know that the third clause in Section 5, the one. Thought we were in a quiet period until the signing on Friday. We were, I said, keeping my voice steady, but the parameters have changed. Changed how? The warmth drained from his voice, replaced by the steel of a man who owned shipping fleets. I've been terminated, I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. It lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. Terminated, he repeated, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. By whom? The board. The SEC fined something. No, I said. By the new vice president's chief of staff. A dress code violation and a misalignment of culture. A dress code violation, Marcus said flatly. Yes. And who is handling the transition of the Montana assets? Nobody, I said. Cassidy, the new chief of staff, believes the files on the server are sufficient. I heard a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a growl. Files on the server listed the Montana property as non-revenue generating acreage. Without your addendum, the algorithm will flag it for liquidation within 6 months. Correct, I said. So, they fired the only person who knows where the bodies are buried, and they did it 2 days before the biggest merger in their history. That appears to be the situation. Emily, Marcus said, and his voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Are you free for breakfast tomorrow? Unemployed, Marcus. I'm free all day. Good. Meet me at the Pierre, 8 a.m. And Emily. Yes. Don't sign anything with them. Not a severance package, not an NDA extension. Nothing. I wouldn't dream of it. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding. A slow, heavy drum in my chest. I had just crossed the Rubicon. I wasn't just a fired employee anymore. I was an active combatant. I closed the leather binder and locked the drawer. Apartment felt different now. It wasn't a refuge anymore. It was a war room. The Pierre Hotel serves breakfast with the kind of hushed efficiency that makes you feel like you're plotting a coup, which in a way we were. Marcus Sterling looked exactly as he always did. Immaculate in a navy suit, silver hair swept back, eyes that had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. We didn't discuss the weather. We didn't discuss the menu. They called my team this morning, Marcus said, buttering a piece of toast with surgical precision. Oh, I sipped my tea. Yes, a woman named Cassidy. She sounded breathless. Marcus paused, a flicker of amusement dancing in his eyes. She told my lead counsel that you were unavailable due to a sudden medical emergency. She said you were hospitalized with severe exhaustion, but had fully briefed her on the deal. I set my cup down. The audacity was breathtaking. It wasn't just a lie. It was a verifiable, dangerous lie. If I was sick, the deal could be delayed legally. If I was fired, the key man clause in the contract, which stated that key personnel changes must be disclosed immediately, would trigger a voiding of the exclusivity agreement. She's trying to buy time. Minute 5 minutes. 10. The rain started to fall, blurring the glass, turning the world into a watercolor painting of gray and steel, but I saw everything clearly. I paid for the coffee. I checked my reflection in the window. My blazer was perfect. My distressed tote bag was on my shoulder. It was time to go say hello. The lobby of the Sterling Hart building was designed to intimidate. 3 stories of marble, a waterfall that cost more than my college tuition, and diligence and good faith, Marcus said, his voice ice cold. You have demonstrated neither. He turned on his heel. Good day. The moment the revolving door spun shut behind Marcus Sterling, the lobby exploded. It wasn't a physical explosion. The psychological blast wave was just as violent. The CFO, a man named Henderson, who had survived 3 hostile takeovers and a federal audit, turned on Cassidy with a face the color of a ripe plum. You fired her, Henderson roared. The acoustics of the lobby amplified his rage into a thunderclap. You fired the liaison without consulting legal, without consulting the board. She was insubordinate, Cassidy cried, shrinking back against the security desk. It was disrespectful. I am the VP's chief of staff. You're a liability, Henderson shouted, spittle flying. Do you have any idea what you just did? That was $3 billion walking out the door. That was our stock price. That was my pension. Security guards were looking at their shoes. Receptionists were pretending to type on dead keyboards. I stood there, an observer to the carnage. Cassidy looked around wildly for an ally. Her eyes landed on me. Hate them was toxic, but it was mixed with a terrifying realization that she had dug her own grave. This is your fault. She screamed at me. You set me up. You planned this. I planned to wear a blazer, I said calmly, my voice cutting through her hysteria. You planned the rest, Cassidy. Henderson spun toward me. Emily, please ignore her. She's suspended. Effective immediately, he glared at Cassidy. Get out of my sight. Go to your father's office and wait there. Don't speak to anyone. If you tweet, if you text, I will sue you personally for breach of fiduciary duty. Cassidy let out a sob, a jagged, ugly sound, and ran toward the elevators, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. Henderson took a breath and composed himself, turning a desperate plastic smile toward me. Emily, okay, the damage is bad, but it's not irreversible. We can call Marcus back. We'll tell him it's fixed. You're retired. Senior VP 20% raise stock options. Just pick up the phone. Fix this. I looked at Henderson. I had worked for him for 10 years. He had never once asked about my family. He had never once said thank you when I saved a quarter's earnings with a clever negotiation. He only cared now because the ship was sinking. I can't do that, Bob. I said, why not? Name your number. We'll double it. It's not about the number, I said. I reached into my tote bag, distressed leather one that Cassidy hated so much, and pulled out a sleek cream-colored envelope. What is that? Henderson asked. My resignation letter, I lied. It wasn't. It was the onboarding packet for Sterling Holdings, but he didn't need to know that. Or rather, my formal acknowledgement of termination. You can't rehire me. Why? Because I've already accepted a new position. Looked at the CEO. I looked at the CFO. And finally, I looked at Cassidy. I smiled. It was the smile of a woman who knows exactly where the bodies are buried because she's the one holding the shovel. Sorry, I said softly, my voice echoing in the silent room. She fired me. No deal. Marcus stood up. You heard the lady. The offer is 30 cents on the dollar. You have until 5 p.m. to accept or we wait for the bankruptcy auction and buy it for 10. Turned and walked out. I followed him. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. The silence behind me said it all. As we walked to the elevator, Marcus handed me a file. Good work, Director, he said. I took the file. Thank you, Marcus. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in, and for the first time in 15 years, I didn't check the mirror to see if my buttons were straight. I knew they were perfect. We went down, leaving the wreckage on the 42nd floor, and I finally truly exhaled. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.